Welcome back. It's been a couple of weeks. We're heading into the summer break here, so we wanted to put together a quick one this week before we go our respective ways on holidays and so forth. A couple interesting pieces of information or news events this week that we wanted to touch on that are related, specifically prediction markets. So there's it has as a product, prediction markets have gone absolutely ape in the last few years. They've especially attracted a lot of attention from younger demographics because they've got sort of a quasi investment slash betting theme, while explicitly calling themselves not betting. And so they've kind of been able to dodge around some regulatory frameworks that would have otherwise applied to betting platforms and so forth, especially in the US. One of the pieces of information was that a financial provider, Wealthsimple, based in Canada, serving Canadians, is in the process of applying for rolling out their own version of a betting marketplace. The two big ones out of the US that most listeners will recognize is Polymarket and Kalshi. Both of them, Kalshi specifically, actually did a lot of litigating in order to get the regulatory permissions in order to operate. So they actually changed a lot of that regulatory landscape in order to establish themselves. But Polymarket's probably a little bit better known. They were one of the first on the scene. And essentially they offer the ability for people to bet on outcomes. So they'll set up, for example, which politician will win an election, all the way to really, base sporadic stuff like, will the president say the word McDonald's in the next month, stuff like that. For the most part, they have been explicitly banned in a lot of countries, including Canada, although there's ways you can get around it. But there have been a second piece of information that's quite controversial, and that is there was a Wall Street Journal story as well as a Politico story on Polymarket. And specifically, they reported that Polymarket paid online influencers, and these influencers would publish content on their feeds and their channels that was not marked as marketing content. So that's definitely offside a number of laws, including terms of service for the platforms. But essentially what these content creators were doing, or social media handles were publishing content of a fake Polymarket URL. So it's Polymarket, P-O-I, rather than P-O-L-Y. And when you capitalize the I in the URL, you go to Polymarket instead of Polymarket, but it looks identical.
So is that the Temu version? Is that the Temu version of Polymarket?
Exactly. Yeah. But this is the crazy part, is that they actually own the domain. Like they run it. So it's the content creators have actually answered questions, or I wouldn't call it testified, but essentially reported to these reporters that yes, they receive payment. In some cases, they were getting payments from the personal PayPal account of the chief marketing officer, hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments for them to go to this fake URL site and place trades, record themselves placing essentially trades or bets that in reality would not have paid out, or would not have paid out in the way that they suggested or advertised they were doing. Anyway, so it kind of, there's a lot of questions around growth at any costs. Is this, explicitly illegal? Well, yes, if they were marketing it as content that, should have been, disclosed as paid advertising, then that's one thing. But is it fraud to entice people to start making bets? The other thing is that there's also a sort of secondary chapter to this prediction market piece, which is there's been a huge amount of insider trading. So one of the probably the most famous example is there was a market on Polymarket related to whether or not Maduro, Venezuela's dictator, Maduro would be removed from office. And one of the SEAL members that was involved in the covert operation to remove him from office actually placed, I think it was a $50,000 wager the day before they went out to remove him. And he was actually, because it was so obvious that it was insider information, he was actually charged and convicted of essentially insider trading. And sorry, this was actually done by the Army or by the Marine Corps rather than the FDA, or sorry, the the FTC. I think it would be the depositing. Anyways, the financial regulator within the U.S. Anyway, so bit of an introduction. Andrew, what are your thoughts? Like, how do you feel about prediction markets as a whole, and any thoughts on the potential that this product is entering Canada?
Listen, I think this prediction market's been around for forever, and I think banning it is not going to really solve the problem because people probably use VPNs and other ways to get around or circumvent it anyway. So I think it's here to stay, right? Like it's popular. We know it's popular. We know it's a way for people to wager and bet on certain odds and events. I think it's a good thing in one sense that it is controlled and monitored, because you don't want it to be utilized for insider trading or anything like that. I think it's one of those market that you can bet on, but it has to be controlled and regulated, because it can quickly get out of hand if people start making bets on things that are unethical. Like I know there's a big thing around prediction market and ethics, for example, right? Like you start people can create markets that incentivize individuals to act in certain ways because of the outcome, right? Like for example, assassinations, things like that can happen because it incentivizes people to want that outcome, right? And there will be real world impact. So I think it's here to stay. We know that, and I think the interesting thing is that Canada has banned it for so long. I know Ontario also banned Polymarket when it pretty much has reached into Canada, and quickly after that they banned it. And the issue with that is now it kind of limits Canadians and Ontarians to not be able to bet on certain events that they may have access to otherwise. Like other jurisdiction that may have this opportunity for them to invest in or to make bets on a certain outcome, like sports betting, for example. It's extremely efficient on poly markets and these prediction markets. Elections, for example, is extremely popular in the U.S. for these type of reasons. So I think it definitely gives Canadians an opportunity to diversify away from their traditional financial investments, but it also has to be regulated in the sense that it has to be ethical. So my opinion of this is I think it's here to stay, and I think it's great that we're kind of opening up this opportunity. And in fact, I think it's a bit late for them to bring this in, but to see some of the big players bringing it in, like Questrade, Wealthsimple, bringing this to the market, I'm pretty sure we're going to see a good product and a very good user experience. Myself personally, I gravitate to Wealthsimple now because of these, how innovative they are and the opportunities they're giving the investors, right? So I think it's a positive. I think it's a cool thing they're doing, but it's definitely going to be something that regulators and you know going to have to keep an eye on.
So,
Mike, what are
Okay.
your opinion on all this?
well, I'm not too well versed with prediction markets. So, just to understand the prediction markets a little bit more, like I'm familiar with Poly and I'm familiar you could place bets and wagers. They facilitate it all on their website, like all the financial transactions. Is there any, so it's all facilitated through them. So what financial regulator would be, would they be reporting into? Do we know that? Like,
There's probably like Euro, like the Canadian like investment regulators. They will probably be involved, and they're probably the Ontario version of the SEC. Will
SEC. Yeah, that's what
probably
I was wondering. Like, is it an SEC that
yeah, the
regulates
So,
OSC will probably be involved, like the Ontario Securities
commission?
Enforcement. Like those
couple
guys.
pieces of info. So the Wealthsimple product, Wealthsimple Predict, is actually backed by Kalshi. So what they're doing is they're giving Canadians access to roughly 4,000 Kalshi existing event contracts, and they exclude explicitly at this point under current approvals, they exclude sports and elections contracts. So it's primarily based on economic indicators, financial markets, and climate contracts. And in the US, the part of the way that they were able to get regulated is that they are considered a designated contract market. So they're regulated by the CFTC, the Commodities
CFTC.
Futures Trading Commission.
Got it.
Yeah. So in Canada, the main entrant is going to be this Kalshi backed Wealthsimple product. But one other point, especially for you, Mike, because especially from like a kid's perspective, there are other platforms like Meta that are also trialing or in the process of developing and rolling out their own variants of these sort of prediction markets. But yeah, so they actually they're the ones that essentially, that these platforms essentially find the capacity. So, they'll offer the odds like a typical betting app, and they're essentially the ones that will collect the fees and pay out the winnings.
And when Poly entered here, Polymarket, it was banned in Ontario by the regulators. Is it Canada wide? Is in Alberta? Do you have any of these Kalshi or Poly market there, Kyle?
So I don't believe we do. So we don't even have sports betting. We have one provincially accepted. It's essentially a public sports book in Alberta. But as I understand it, they're in the process of going through like a private market access for existing book runners, because you guys in Ontario have, I think you have the sort of the most widely adopted or the broadest licensing around betting,
Yeah,
gambling.
there's a lot of sports betting apps and platforms.
Yeah, so I think it's going to start in Ontario and then probably work its way out the rest of the country. So
What's the
Alberta
difference?
definitely isn't.
Yeah, what's the difference between sports betting and kind of these predictive markets? Is it an age? Is there age restrictions? Like, what if you put an age restriction? Are they worried about the access? Maybe uneducated or
This
young
is
individuals
yeah.
going on and placing
Why
wagers on things.
this is why
So this is a
is so open, right? Like it's not it's kind of a threat to these sports betting platforms. Like it's a bit of a threat for them, because you can virtually create any market. And for me, we're talking a lot about the negative, but there's also the positive that comes out of these things. The positive is how fast information can travel, because of these prediction markets, right? So you can essentially use this to predict certain outcome much faster. So with the election, for example, the prediction markets reacted to certain things before the market even gets certain news, right? It improves the speed of which information travels. That's the interesting things. Like, let's just say if there's a like one candidate have an edge over another candidate in an election, that information would travel so fast because there's incentive for people to go on the platform and make bets right away. So those are the benefits. So it's kind of the benefit is the data that you get out of it, and how fast you can kind of harness this prediction of the mass. Like is the whole reason I think when I looked at prediction market many years ago, we're talking about 2016 when these things weren't even popular. It was to harness that data because the information can travel so fast. So you can use these things as oracles pretty much for certain events that you want to use inside your platform, like a hurricane, for example, or like a flight delay. Like basically you can do all these things that will give you information much faster, and that you can use that to formulate an outcome of another contract, like a crypto contract or something like that will pay out for, like, an automated insurance contract, for example, right? Like that. Those are the kind of things that prediction market was, at least when I was looking at it years ago, that was the benefit of it. But now it's being utilized for many other things, like to hedge certain risk, to to really, I guess, make money on certain thing, insiders, like there's the use cases that really open up, I guess, over the past couple of years, which makes it interesting. So, the negative is there, obviously, but there's also the positive that I just want to kind of bring up during this conversation.
So it sounds like there's potentially even more positive, more advantages than disadvantages, granted the right safeguards are in place to protect vulnerable individuals from going on and placing risky bets.
I
Is
don't
that-
think that there's very many guardrails. So definitely they have age restrictions, but they also have geolocation restrictions that people get around all the time. So I think, for the most part, most teenagers, if they want to get around some sort of an age restriction, they're pretty very often able to, right? So I don't know that that's really going to save them, but I definitely think that there's, to your point, Mike, like a lot of the criticism, and this again ties back to the original, one of the developing stories around them essentially creating content. That content is directed at young people, right? It's not, and they could argue, 18 to 25 or whatever that demographic is. Like there's a ton of people online, teenagers online, that are viewing that content, thinking that they can get rich with the prediction markets because they're seeing this type of content. And to Andrew's point, like one of the things that I find quite interesting, the little amount that I've investigated it, is it does look like, based on how the markets are formed and how the wagers, like essentially how the odds come about, is that it looks like there's a lot more opportunity for arbitrage than in typical, betting markets. And so one example is Polymarket's very well known in the crypto space. So you can place essentially market driven outcomes based on how Bitcoin is going to move, based on, buying and selling, like large companies like MicroStrategy, buying or selling Bitcoin, stuff like that. And so if you have, again, like if you're essentially certain that an event is going to happen, you could potentially get 5 points off of it, right? So that's really unusual. That typically doesn't happen. And there's no sort of gambling or sports book where the events are, 99.9% certainty and you're still able to get, a few percentage points of upside. So that's really unique. And I think that, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops in the future, because that's definitely the draw with especially young people, is like, this is guaranteed money. If I know something, or I think I know something, it's going to be easier to make money. The other thing, just quickly, was what Andrew touched on, was the ability of that data, or the sort of crowd-funded, data provision. Like, it's fascinating to watch, especially the election markets, because I think they've been right like 100% of the time, or like 99.5% of the time. Like, and we're talking like months out. So it's absolutely fascinating to see just where the market is moving, and for that to be able to predict outcomes far better than polling and anything else we've used.
Well, I guess it's like any like powerful technology. I relate it back to like AI. It can be used for extreme good, and also on the flip side, it can be used for extreme bad. Like you can use this tool for forecasting, which is phenomenal. It has the ability to forecast into the future, like Andrew mentioned. But at the same time, it could be just you know online gambling dressed up as some new tech advice, tech innovative solution, but it's really just dressed up online gambling. And I'm not saying that's what it is, but that's how people can use it.
Yeah,
So
I think my only argument to that is that, the whole market, or any kind of market, can be considered gambling, right? Like when you're buying a piece of equity, you're buying a stock or whatever, and the trading, the high velocity trading, that can be all considered gambling in a way,
but isn't
right?
that
So
more heavily regulated, Andrew? And there's a lot more restrictions in
mm,
place to be able to say, I
there's
don't really have a Wealth Simple account. I'm trading with
yeah,
more of the traditional platforms, and there's a lot of setup and like kind of qualification that goes into before you could start making trades.
well, yeah, like there's definitely the heavy requirements for you to know the risk, like you have to kind of know the risk and everything like that. You have to sign a bunch of papers before you start, dabbling into like options market, all these other things, but they're available, right? And it's a form of essentially the same thing. You're just betting, you're just hedging, like a prediction market is just another market that just, I guess, bet on certain things that are outside of the financial industry,
I
right?
guess I'm
Outside
just
of
more
finance.
worried about the youth, but I don't even know this question. Maybe we should answer. We should look into it. When can someone start uh, trading? Like, is there an age
Typically,
18.
limit on that?
yeah, typically 18, like the
18?
gambling age is 18, like just like anything
Age
Even
else.
buying
majority.
stocks, like, yeah, you have to hold it in trust before then. So before 18, shares have to be held in trust by an adult. Is that how it works?
Shares, yes, yes, has to be
You
18. Yep.
can't you can't transact as a minor.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about Polymarket? Can you go on
No, same
and
thing. Age of majority. So this is the interesting thing. So you can trade as an 18-year-old in the States. You can't drink as an 18-year-old, right? So it's kind of, yeah, so it's 18 in the States.
Okay. Well, it
So
has the
it's not,
same restrictions.
yeah. It's interesting because what I find is like, again, my only concern is, yeah, like, it's regulated, uh, then it's fine. But, there's those ethics questions that can come up, right? Where people would, in the physical world, they will try to make certain outcome happen, right? Like there's been
Yeah,
talks
bet on something and then try to make it
influence
happen,
that,
you're
yeah,
saying.
exactly, try to influence some way, or have some sort of insider information. I know one of the big thing that, one of the big ethics question when prediction market, kind of started springing up was assassinations. Like, is it, what if someone bet on some sort of assassination, for example, like, but those things, if the platforms are there and it's regulated, markets like that can't spring up, then yes, like that prevents that. But that's, again, like, it depends on how people formulate these questions, right? Like, that can trigger something like that to happen. So there's a lot of ethics questions that I think has to go into this.
Makes sense.
Um, so
So,
because
okay,
kind of market.
I don't know about any assassination plots or outcomes, but did you guys remember the WNBA dildo wagers? So this is a perfect example. So Polymarket, brilliant marketing strategy. One of the markets was whether or not somebody would throw a dildo on the court of a WNBA game. And they did it like 10 times because it
There's
paid out. Right. And so to your point, Andrew, like if you yourself can actually control the outcome, like you're going to, if it's a 90% payout and you're like, hey, I can do this, I'm going to place my life savings as a wager. And then I'm just going to go and do whatever it is. Like that's a
Exactly.
real thing.
streaking across a
This is
game or
the
throw a
ethics. This is
dildo
the ethics part
onto
of
the
these
court.
So
markets.
here's another thing that this reminds me of. Have you guys ever heard of binary options? Have you ever traded binary options? I don't know if they were around in Canada. So I came across them probably 20 years ago in England, in London, and they were banned, I want to say almost 10 years ago now, for being high risk. So when I was there, it was the prediction market of that decade. It was absolutely insane. Every single TV commercial, every single newspaper, people were marketing these binary options. And all it was it was a binary yes, no, whether an event would happen.
Mhm.
So you would place a bet, you would place essentially an investment, like they termed it an option, but it was a bet, right? Like that's all it was, is whether or not some outcome would happen. And for the most part, it started as like, again, like weather events and like really obscure, innocent type stuff. And then again, anybody that wanted to host a contract that said something specific, they could. And then it started to get into the financial markets. So again, is this stock going to go up or down? Is it going to go up 10% or more? And the crazy part is again, if you have the power, if you have the clout to be able to make those sorts of swings, you're getting, you're adding a ton of leverage to whatever your trades are. So it got to be a point where it was already quite sketchy, but it got to be a point where it was like, this is unreliable, what's happening behind the scenes. And people were losing their houses because they were like, this has got to be like a no. And then it would be a yes and they'd lose it all. Anyways, the FCA, the Financial Authority in the UK, banned it outright.
Wild.
But yeah, I don't know if you guys have come across those. Those were like hardcore, like public, gambling, like everybody was going for it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it'll be interesting to see. My prediction of the prediction markets is within 10 years, they're going to be banned across the
I
globe.
think I think
I
it's
think,
I think
I think it's a
I'm
slippery
yeah.
slope.
What do you yeah, I'm curious to know, like, how do you think they're gonna enforce this ban across the globe?
They're just not going to, so similar to how Polymarket initially started, they were essentially fined by, not the financial regulator. They were fined by what's the betting regulator in the States? Anyways, whoever regulates sports betting in the US federally.
Gaming commission. Yeah, I'll find it. I'll
I
find it.
Anyways, they were fine. And Polymarket essentially 5 years ago or whatever, when they first started getting big, they were geo restricting users from the States. So they essentially officially said, you cannot use our market from the US. And people were clearly using them from the US. So the answer is like, all you can really do is either outlaw it and try and restrict people, geolocate people or whatever. You have to have a verified identity with a credit card from a specific country, whatever. Like, people are going to get around it, but I predict that they're going to be outlawed, especially if companies like Meta are trying to bring out watered down versions and they're trying to get into like sub 18-year-olds. It's just going to end badly, and I think there's going to be a lot of restrictions around it.
It was in
Yeah,
the
I
Netherlands. Are you sure it wasn't the Netherlands? Because the Dutch Gaming Authority apparently was fining Polymarket some crazy, like £420,000 per week. So they had a penalty, a weekly penalty, unless they stopped serving Dutch users.
It sounds about right. So this one I've read is actually the CFTC. So it's not the gaming regulator. So CFTC fined Polymarket in 2022 because they weren't registered, and then Polymarket following that agreed to block US users. And then last year, Polymarket purchased a CFTC licensed clearinghouse, I believe it was, and so they now have a registration similar to Kalshi, so that the US market can access them. So I think it's just a matter of time. It's like sports betting. I think all of us, I'm curious your guys' thoughts being on Ontario, but I'm tired of seeing sports betting adverts online already. Like, it's been 2 years. Like, it's just, there's just too much fuel for the fire, and I think it's going to be abused. I think if it were done like reasonably, and I think there were some guardrails around it, maybe, but I think it's just, there's too much money to be made. And when you hear about stories like Polymarket juicing their marketing, like posting fake bets, like, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
guess they make it more accessible and easier. Some of these gambling, sites and these predictive markets. But like Andrew mentioned, if there's a will, there's a way. And back in the day when all these online gambling sites weren't available, there was what they called bookies, and they're still around. We all know a few bookies, and they're doing sports betting and gambling illegally. Just like before marijuana got legalized, there was the drug dealers that were dealing marijuana. So, the people that wanted to do it found a way. But I guess, yes, this makes it much more accessible. However, as long as it's regulated, I think it's okay as long as it's regulated. But who knows? There is a lot of territory that comes with it, such as fake videos and influencers. I guess it could get abused.
Yeah.
It can
Do
get
you have any
abused.
concerns your kids, you're going to use it, Mike?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't. I don't love that there's all these attractive nuisances available to them growing up, especially because they're so influenced now by social media. They're on YouTube, they're on TikTok, and that is their source of information. As much as we try to limit it, it's like a struggle. Like, we're fighting to take that away from them, but that is like, they crave what they receive from those sources. So if those sources tell them to go bet on this Polymarket, or go do this or go do that, they're going to do it because they view these things as trusted sources of information. But that's a different problem altogether. That's something else separate, I believe, for another day.
Yeah. I obviously have the opposing view, of
The
Kyle.
glass is half full.
Yeah, like I think it's here to stay, and I think it's there's going to be more regulatory requirements and things that will keep it around. It's just too big of a market now to disappear and to get rid of. And my view of the future, it's very obviously contrarian and sci-fi and all that stuff. So my view is that I think that AI and like prediction markets are here to stay. And prediction markets is a very important source of information for AI, right? It is kind of like it's this lens into the real world. And I think as AI becomes more and more prevalent, it's going to be very important for it to have this kind of information of the real world, right? Because it's just it's just that fast. The information that flows into these prediction markets is extremely fast, and we've seen already AI has the capability of looking at prediction markets, and Grok, for example, uses Polymarket for its data, right? And that's why some of the information that we get from there, they're so relevant and so accurate, down to the minute sometimes. And that I think is going to be very important. So cutting off, something like prediction market is like cutting off a piece of vital information that AI needs in order to assess its surrounding, its awareness. It's just that I think that world we're moving towards that world. We're moving towards a world where there's AI is going to be an integral part of our lives, and prediction market is one of those areas that even itself can make a bet on, right? There's probably AI right now trading on the prediction market, right? Like it's probably making predictions on certain events in the world. So, and people are harnessing this kind of stuff to capitalize on it. And I think, as there's less opportunity on one end, there's opportunity on the other end for individuals to capitalize on prediction markets and AI, because that's where we're going. So that's my view. I think it's here to stay. I think it's gonna be regulated to some degree, but it's here to stay.
You went on such a
What do you
rant,
think,
and
Mike?
I was hoping you would notice that I was playing the Terminator Judgment Day song in the background while you were speaking.
No, we didn't hear it.
I was playing in the background for you while you were going on your AI rant. I was playing a Skynet song from Terminator.
I didn't hear it. It's probably blocked it out.
Didn't come
So
through.
it's interesting. So I'm curious your thoughts, Andrew, because it's one thing to say like the utility. So is the utility of the prediction market worth the risk of insider trading and nefarious users? Like, because if you're a user and you're saying, hey, I'm not going to use these platforms because they're not equal, or there's some nefarious something going on in the background, that's argument A. But argument B is to say like, well, they're a better predictor as a result of the data that's flowing through those platforms. And if that data is coming from insider traders or people that have information that other people don't have, that only solidifies or like steelmans the argument that they are the bastion of real-time data.
Yeah, and like what was interesting is that like a lot of the time when there are some of these insider traders, you can kind of question it, right? Like regulators has done this for ages, like even on this the stock market. So I don't see the difference in that, right? Like I think insider trading existed, since the beginning of the market, and this works the same way. And in fact, if there are insider trading, it's very easy to trace if it's on a blockchain. You can trace it back down right to the source, right? There has to be an on ramp and an off ramp for these things, and there has to be some way for them to invest. And because everything is recorded on the blockchain, it actually makes it even easier to trace down to where the source is. Whereas on the market, there could be, as we've seen with like Wolf of Wall Street and all these things, it can be converted into cash and taped to someone's body and brought across the border and stuff like that. So there's it's a bit harder to trace. But on the blockchain, everything is visible. Like I think, and it's very easy to trace down who's making these bets. So that to me is essentially some safeguards that exist for insider trading, and it just it's going to continue to be a cat and mouse game. There will be insider traders and on every single market. It's just a matter of regulators finding a way to stop this, prevent it, and figure out, investigate who these individuals are. So that will continue to be around. I don't think that's going to go away any time. Like it's just like there will always be these bad actors. So regardless of what if it's stock market or prediction market, there will be these individuals.
Gentlemen, this has been insightful. You guys got a lot of opinions and a lot of information on this topic. I think this has been a real learning experience for me, and hopefully it's been a learning experience for our listeners. But it is summer break here, and we're burning the
Mike's
midnight
starving.
oil. Mike's starving because he hasn't eaten breakfast, lunch, and it's going to be dinner soon.
All right, we'll cut it off there. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome.
Thank
Happy
you.
summer.
Thank you.
Tomorrow the kids are off.
You too. Take care, guys.